You know, when we talk about climate activism, we often picture those big marches and international agreements.
Right.
But today, we're diving into a side of the movement that doesn't always make headlines.
Yeah,
And honestly, it's
yeah,
way more inspiring.
absolutely.
We're digging into climate sisters, resisting ecocide.
Great book.
This book takes us straight to the source. Young women around the world, especially in the global south,
Yeah,
who are taking on climate change head on.
it's amazing.
Get ready to hear some eye-opening stories.
What's so powerful about Climate Sisters is how it centers these voices, these young women, that we don't often hear from.
Right.
They're the ones most impacted by climate change, but the least represented.
It's so true. And that's key, right? It's not just about melting ice caps and polar bears. It's about people's lives. And I think this book really drives home how climate change impacts some communities way harder, way sooner than others.
Absolutely. For a long time, the narrative around climate change was presented as this universal experience.
Yeah.
But Climate Sisters disrupts that. You know?
Right, right.
It shows how existing inequalities that impact women and girls, particularly in the global south, are made even worse by a changing climate.
So it's not even just about the environmental impact at that point. It's
Right.
a social justice issue too, right?
Exactly. It's about climate justice.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is it's understanding that the people who contributed the least to causing climate change
Right.
are often the ones who are hit the hardest by the consequences. Take access to education, for example. When a family's struggling to recover after a climate disaster, something like a flood or a drought,
Yeah.
girls are often the first ones pulled out of school
Wow.
to help out at home or try to, earn an income.
So their chance at a future is literally washed away by something that, like you said, they had almost no part in causing.
Exactly.
That's heartbreaking, but it's also such a stark illustration of what this book is trying to tell us.
Right.
But can we back up for just a second?
Of course, yeah.
We keep hearing this term global south. What does that even mean for those of us who are maybe still trying to wrap our heads around it?
It's a term that's used to describe regions in Latin America, Asia, Africa, and Oceania
Okay.
that were frequently, and in many cases still are, subject to colonial rule and exploitation.
Right.
And today, these are the same regions that are on the front lines of climate change. They're experiencing those really intense impacts first.
And that's exactly why this book focuses on them, right?
Yes.
Because their stories don't just highlight how urgent this climate crisis is, but also the resilience of the people who are fighting for change.
And their ingenuity. I mean, Climate Sisters introduces us to young women like Deborah Adegbile, a teenager from Nigeria,
Yes.
who's already seeing these devastating effects.
Her story was one that really, really stayed with me.
Yeah.
Just imagine being 12 years old
I know.
and your city is basically underwater.
Right.
She talks about struggling to even get to school because of these constant floods and Legos.
It's unimaginable.
It really makes you think about how many futures are being jeopardized right now.
And that's just one story.
Yeah.
Deborah's experience reminds us that for a lot of young people in the global south, climate change isn't some far-off threat.
Right.
It's their daily reality.
It's affecting their education, their health, their chance to even have a future.
And that's exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Climate change, stealing childhoods, and stealing potential.
It's just not right.
It's not. But it's not all doom and gloom. Climate Sisters also shows us the incredible work these young women are doing to come up with solutions. And talking about facing challenges head on, Aisha Akbar's story, she's in Pakistan, really shows how connected these issues are.
Yeah, Aisha focuses on water scarcity and sanitation, right?
Right.
In Balochistan, which honestly not a place you hear a lot about in those big global climate conversations.
And yet, it's a region facing some of the most severe water stress anywhere in the world. And Aisha's story, it reveals how connected climate change is to social and political power.
Because it's not just about a lack of resources, is it?
Exactly.
It's about, well, who gets to control those resources?
Yes.
And who suffers the most when they become scarce?
Exactly. Aisha talks about how dangerous it is for her to speak out against these inequalities, to challenge the people in power. And her story is a stark reminder, I think, for a lot of us, that for activists in the global south, just advocating for climate justice, just speaking up,
It can be really risky.
it can be dangerous.
It makes you think about the courage it takes to raise your voice when you know you might be putting yourself at risk.
Absolutely. And that's something that comes up again and again in Climate Sisters is incredible courage. Take Mona Al-Ajrami in Jordan, for instance.
Oh, yes.
She's all about empowering other girls through leadership programs.
Yeah, and those community initiatives.
Yes.
I loved her story. I love that she's not just talking about the problems. She's out there planting climate-resilient crops.
Exactly.
She's showing that these practical, hands-on solutions, they are possible.
It's about action.
Yeah.
And that's at the heart of what Climate Sisters is pushing for. It's not just about awareness.
Right.
It's about taking action. Moma and others like her, they're out there making a difference in their communities.
And it really highlights that these activists, they aren't just responding to climate change in a bubble.
Right.
It's like they're grappling with this whole web of interconnected issues.
And that's what we call intersectional environmentalism.
Okay, so I have to admit something.
What's that?
I hear that term everywhere, intersectional environmentalism.
Sure.
But I think a little refresher would be helpful. What does it actually mean, like in the context of these stories we're talking about?
It means recognizing climate change doesn't happen in isolation.
Right.
It's not this separate thing. It overlaps with and makes worse all these existing social inequalities.
Okay, I'm with you.
So think about something like deforestation.
Okay.
Often we think of it as just this environmental problem.
Right, trees.
Trees, but it's so much bigger than that. It has this domino effect.
Because in so many parts of the global south, women rely on forests for, well, everything.
Yes.
Food, fuel, even medicine.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So when you start destroying forests, it's women who are disproportionately impacted.
Right.
It impacts their income, their health, their ability to even just take care of their families.
Wow.
That's why you have someone like Deborah in Nigeria. She might be fighting for clean air and access to health care.
Right, right.
And then you have Aisha in Pakistan, and she's focused on water rights and making sure girls get an education.
But they're all connected.
It's all connected.
It's like they're not even looking at climate change as this one separate issue.
Yeah.
It's this multifaceted thing
Right.
that impacts literally every part of their lives.
And you know what? Because of that, their solutions tend to be so much more effective.
Oh, interesting.
You're not putting a Band-Aid on a broken leg. You know what I mean?
Right.
They're getting down to those root causes.
It makes you realize this book isn't just about climate change.
No.
It's about resilience.
Yes.
It's about courage.
It's about the power of young women
Yeah.
to create change when the odds are stacked against them.
Exactly.
It reminds us that climate action, it's not just governments making policies or inventing new technologies.
Right.
It's about empowering those who are most affected.
Yes, 100%. And what I find so inspiring is that these young women, they're not waiting around for someone to give them permission to act
Right.
or for the people in charge to magically fix everything. They're like, nope, we're taking charge. We're demanding action now.
It's a powerful reminder. Even with this massive global crisis, individual voices taking action can make a difference.
I love that.
It's about recognizing the power these communities have.
So for anyone listening who maybe feels a little overwhelmed or a little hopeless about the state of the planet,
Yeah,
these stories are like a shot of optimism.
they are.
So, as we wrap up our deep dive on Climate Sisters, what's the one thing you really hope our listeners take away from this conversation?
I think we hear a lot about the burden on young people to fix the climate crisis.
Yeah, it's a lot of pressure.
It is, but Climate Sisters kind of turns that around.
Okay.
It makes us ask if these young women are already leading the way
Right.
with such courage and ingenuity. What does that say about the responsibility of those in power to act now?
Wow. That is a question, isn't it?
It is.
And it's not just about, supporting these young activists. It's about following their lead, amplifying their voices. Absolutely.
Demanding action from the people who can actually make a difference on a global scale. So to everyone listening, really think about that question.
Yeah.
Because the future isn't something that just happens to us.
Right.
It's something we're all creating together.